Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's #2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. The local fiscal crisis, which we have been following for the last few years, has reached a new alarming point. For the longest time, it was poorer regions that were devastated by China's ongoing fiscal strain. Now, however, Shenzhen, one of China's most economically dynamic and advanced cities, is beginning to feel the pain. Shenzhen, China's third largest city by GDP, is facing a historic dip in fiscal revenue, marking the first decline since 1990. As Chinese financial media outlet Caixin writes today, the downturn highlights the financial struggles of local governments amid sluggish economic growth and weakened tax revenues. But even the outlet expresses concern that one of China's top cities is also experiencing this pain. While the city government has yet to release its official annual work report, a now removed January report from Yantian district indicated that Shenzhen's general public budget revenue contracted by 4.8% in 2024. If accurate, this suggests the city's general public budget revenue fell to 391.5 billion yuan, $55 billion from 411.3 billion yuan the previous year. Caixin explains that Shenzhen's decline aligns with broader financial trends in Guangdong province, where tax revenue dropped 4.2%, contributing to an overall fiscal revenue contraction of 2.3%. And remember, this area, along with the Yangtze River Delta, is the most economically dynamic part of the country. Indeed, I am personally shocked by this. I did not expect Tier 1 cities to see fiscal hits like the rest of the country. Nationally, China's GPB revenue grew slightly by 1.3% to nearly 22 trillion yuan, but tax revenue, its largest component, fell 3.4% to 17.5 trillion yuan. The Ministry of Finance attributed this decline to weak domestic demand, lower producer prices — we remember that producers have seen deflation for almost 3 years now — and lingering tax reduction policies. Shenzhen's heavy reliance on tax revenue exacerbates its fiscal challenges. In 2023, tax contributed 84.3% of the city's revenue, a level comparable to economic hubs like the capital and Shanghai. Declining corporate profits and a struggling property sector further strained tax income. Meanwhile, Shenzhen's historically low non-tax revenue, such as fines and asset sales, limits its ability to offset losses. In 2024, some districts, including Futian, saw steep declines in non-tax revenue, reflecting efforts to maintain a favorable business environment. In contrast, non-tax revenue at the national level surged 25.4% last year, driven by increased profits from state-owned entities and asset revitalization. It also involved, as we have seen, the confiscation of private assets. Thus, it is no surprise that this higher non-tax revenue is being seen in the poorer state-dominated regions of the country, where the private sector is being cannibalized. Shenzhen's fiscal performance will be officially confirmed during its upcoming legislative meeting, but early indicators suggest a challenging financial landscape ahead. On this development, veteran China analyst Bill Bishop observed today, quote, "Local government fiscal struggles are one more reason the leadership needs the private sector to do more, and why they appear to be pursuing a loving and supportive bear hug of the private firms and entrepreneurs that behave correctly." End quote. And this brings us to our next development. Yesterday, Monday, General Secretary Xi Jinping convened a high-profile symposium with leading private entrepreneurs, marking the third such meeting since 2018. The event, attended by 3 other standing committee members, Li Qiang, Wang Huning, and Ding Xuexiang, highlighted the government's renewed emphasis on supporting and revitalizing the private sector amid economic crises and growing global trade tensions. The presence of prominent business leaders, including Alibaba's Jack Ma, signaled a notable shift in Beijing's stance towards private enterprises. Ma, who disappeared from public view following his 2020 speech critical of financial regulators, appeared rehabilitated as he stood alongside other top executives. Analysts viewed this as a strategic move by Beijing to restore confidence in the private sector, which has been weakened by regulatory crackdowns, economic downturns, and the ongoing technology and trade war with the United States. Xi reassured entrepreneurs that the Communist Party would, quote, "unwaveringly encourage, support, and guide the development of the private economy," end quote. He pledged a level playing field for private businesses while continuing to strengthen the state sector. Addressing long-standing grievances, he promised to tackle high financing costs, late payments by state entities, and arbitrary fines and inspections that have burdened businesses. Video footage from the event showed Huawei's Ren Zhengfei and Xiaomi's Lei Jun reading prepared statements before she spoke. The General Secretary urged business leaders to channel their entrepreneurial drive and patriotism towards technological innovation and national economic growth, expressing, quote, "Entrepreneurs should be full of entrepreneurial and patriotic passion, continuously elevate their ideals, and cultivate a deep sense of national responsibility." End quote. Even when the party is trying to support the private sector, some of these comments do still sound quite disquieting. The meeting underscored Beijing's efforts to counteract the negative impact of the property sector slowdown and regulatory tightening on investment and consumer sentiment. Notably, political theorist Wang Huning praised Xi's insights and called for their implementation to foster a, quote, "new chapter," end quote, in private enterprise development. The seating arrangement was also scrutinized, with key figures from leading technology and industrial firms positioned prominently, including Wang Xingxing of Unitree Robotics, Yu Renrong of Will Semiconductor, and Liu Yonghao of New Hope. Despite the positive signaling, concerns remain about Beijing's long-term policy direction, however. Experts, including Zhang Jiang, a former internet analyst at UBS, cautioned that while the meeting reflects a willingness to engage with private businesses, stringent controls over strategically important technologies such as AI will likely persist. The key question remains whether this apparent policy shift will be sustained in the long run or merely serve as a temporary measure to stabilize economic confidence. And of course, these technology leaders are not stupid. They know the political winds can change very suddenly in China, with their assets on the line, or worse. Indeed, some of those in attendance at the meeting have the scars to prove it. Next up, we have two more developments to cover, but just quickly, if you're getting some value from today's episode of China Update, it's a huge help if you can hit the like button. Liking, sharing, and subscribing are the only ways in which the channel can grow and be shown to new people, so this is a tremendous help. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are also in the description for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable. Thank you so much. Next up, at the Munich Security Conference, Chinese Foreign Minister and top diplomat Wang Yi seized a strategic opportunity to position China as a stabilizing force in an increasingly turbulent global landscape. Whether the Europeans buy it, of course, is another matter. While US Vice President J.D. Vance criticized European allies, Wang refrained from condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine and instead reiterated China's stance on respecting sovereignty, framing it within Beijing's own interests in Taiwan. In a series of high-profile meetings with European leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the NATO Secretary-General, Wang sought to strengthen China's ties with a Europe shaken by geopolitical uncertainty. Beijing's narrative was clear. China is not a disruptor of the international order, but a reliable partner, particularly in contrast to the unpredictability of a US foreign policy. Wang's keynote speech underscored this message, suggesting that Europeans' concerns over China's role in the global system have diminished in light of the US's own withdrawal from key international agreements. His remarks resonated with some European leaders who, wary of Washington's wavering commitment, might find Beijing's overtures appealing. However, this may simply be wishful thinking in Beijing. Washington remains a critical security guarantor in Europe, and China hasn't exactly enjoyed a positive reputation in Europe these last several years, especially with its support for Russia. And indeed, China's economic ties with Russia remain robust, with energy imports exceeding $274 billion since 2022. As the war in Ukraine continues, Beijing's potential role in a post-conflict resolution is under quiet consideration. And while some European leaders are likely concerned about Washington's new foreign policy direction, it does seem unlikely at this point that they will move en masse to a Beijing that for years has frustrated them just as much, if not more, in the realms of trade, overcapacity, and support for Russia. And speaking of diplomacy, this brings us to our last development for today. The US Department of State recently updated its online fact sheet of US-Taiwan relations, omitting the phrase, quote, "we do not support Taiwan independence," end quote, while adding language emphasizing that cross-strait differences should be resolved, quote, "free from coercion in a manner acceptable to the people on both sides of the strait," end quote. The shift has provoked strong reactions from Beijing. The policy adjustment follows a long-standing diplomatic debate over Washington's stance on Taiwan. During the 2023 US-China summit, Beijing reportedly pressured Washington to explicitly state that it opposes Taiwan independence rather than merely not supporting it. The Biden administration refused to comply, and now, under the new Trump administration, the policy language has moved in the opposite direction, angering Chinese officials. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun condemned the change, calling it a, quote, "severe regression," end quote, and demanding that the US reaffirm its commitment to the One China principle. The Taiwan Affairs Office in Beijing echoed this sentiment, urging Washington to stop sending, quote, "wrong signals," end quote, to pro-independence forces in Taiwan. Chinese officials also warned of, quote, "severe damage," end quote, to US-China relations if the US continued to strengthen its ties with Taipei. The updated fact sheet not only removed the previous wording but also reinforced Taiwan's participation in international organizations and mentioned its cooperation with US military technology and semiconductor development projects. Taiwan's foreign minister welcomed these, quote, "Taiwan-friendly," end quote, changes, interpreting them as increased US support for them. Meanwhile, reports suggest Taiwan is considering a multi-billion-dollar arms purchase from the US to bolster its defense against mounting Chinese military pressure. The region has seen increased Chinese military exercises, we've covered them all here on China Update, which US officials warn could serve as cover for actual invasion preparations. The recent joint statement by the US, Japan, and South Korea also underscored opposition to unilateral changes to the Indo-Pacific status quo, reinforcing concerns over China's assertiveness in the Taiwan Strait. Beijing has firmly opposed such statements, accusing foreign governments of meddling in its internal affairs. As tensions escalate, the evolving US stance signals a potentially more confrontational approach to cross-strait relations, further straining US-China ties. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Tuesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.